I've always been kind of like to play multiple positions. And I really like the intersection of making business decisions in even areas of uncertainty. I've found like a lot of people would like a lot more certainty than maybe I believe truly exists in the world. And what I think a legal degree helps you to understand is how to weigh uncertainty and kind of like weigh it out.
Want to make the leap from lawyer to founder? What do you need to know? Is it harder than expected? Worth the journey? Today, we are joined on the abstract by Aaron Gregory, co-founder and CEO of Upwardli. Upwardli, which I will have Aaron also explain to us, is like Stripe for credit, making it easy for companies to launch credit products that just work. Before launching Upwardli, Aaron was the general counsel of Remitly, where he led the legal compliance and risk functions up until their $7 billion IPO. He also has past in-house legal experience, and he started his legal career at Dentons and Kelly Dry and Warren, focused on federal regulatory matters. Aaron, thanks so much for joining me for this episode of The Abstract.
Tyler, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I mentioned that you started working on federal regulatory matters. Maybe we can start there. I think a through line in your career has always been working on highly regulated areas. Has that always been an interest of you, or is that something that you just fell into?
I think it's something I actually fell into. So I graduated law school in 2009 and I did a JD-MBA. And my goal was like, I want to be a corporate lawyer. Like I want to do deals. I want to do that. But as you know, there was a big recession in 2009. So I graduated GW Law in 2009 and had an offer at Kelly Dry and Warren. And I got to, like many, we got deferred a little bit. And then I get there and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do deals. And they're like, there are no deals. Find something else to do. So like I found myself, they're like, okay, you can pick. We have all these other practice areas. Just corporate's not going to be one of them. And we had this great telecom firm, telecom practice. And I was like, that's interesting. Like there's technology there, which I'm into, and there's deals going on. So like, I'll go over there. I didn't love telecom like as a practice, but what I saw as soon as I got there was like the industry consolidation that was sort of the outcome of the huge explosion of telecom innovation and like the move from analog networks and to competitive and mobile telecom. It all just happened. And like, it looked like this tsunami had come through and just leveled the industry. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like something big just happened here. So I said to myself, like, okay, that's interesting. Like lawyers are well situated to help in those heavily regulated industries. So like, find other industries that are going to want to do in networks what just happened in telecom and just park yourself there. And like, I don't know what's going to happen, but like innovation will happen and you can like opt into that. So I did that and ended up going and looked around and saw, okay, well, payment networks and electric networks are going to want to go from analog, like highly controlled to like digital open. And so I'm like, okay, I started a payments practice at my firm in like 2010. The firm thought it was crazy because they're like, there's no clients. What are you talking about? I'm like, there'll be clients. Just wait. Well, these clients are very good. And I'm like, they're just not there yet. But I ended up like becoming a fintech specialist before that was a thing. And that's basically how I got started in this financial services role. And, you know, fast forward 15 years, I've been doing it ever since. And it's been a good ride.
That is super interesting that you would be able to sort of like fresh out of law school or a couple years out of law school, maybe you're almost thinking like a VC, right? Like where's the market going to be in a few years? It's not surprising that you ended up as a founder with that sort of mindset that's early on. One of the things that's different about you that you mentioned is that you did a JD-MBA. I do want to ask you about the MBA. Like, do you feel like that sort of idea about where a market's headed, did that come from the MBA? What inspired you to, add on another year and do the MBA as well?
Yeah, so I didn't apply into law school as a JD-MBA. I actually started doing that after I started. So what happened was actually during my first year of law school, I came into law school, like I went straight out from undergrad,
Uh-huh.
more or less because I'm like, I think I want to be a lawyer. I don't have any other better ideas. And if I go like in the workforce right now, like I'll never go back. Like I know myself well enough that I'll just like track, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that becoming a lawyer was a faster way to like get into the like executive suite and advance my career rather than maybe go to marketing or something where like you've got like just a lot of people competing. I'm like, this is a little more rarefied and lawyers have an advantage. So be a lawyer, and respectable, and there's a low downside on that. So I got there and I'm like, okay, great. And then, so like pretty early on, we were in between classes or something, like leave a class and there's a bunch of students like parked outside in like the lobby and they have papers out and they're literally debating a recent like Supreme Court decision.
Sure.
They're like,
that's very DC.
They're like moving it out. And I'm like, oh my God. Like that didn't even occur to me. Like I have no business. Like these people are going to be so much better than me at law because the thought of like using my free time to like read and debate Supreme Court is not like something I'll never do that. So these guys are going to be great lawyers. I'm going to be a terrible lawyer. I need to find something else to do. And then I did a summer associate gig that summer at a big DC law firm. And it kind of drove home the fact that I didn't want to be like a big firm lawyer forever. So I was like, okay, well, I don't think that this is my right path. I understand that now, but I do enjoy business. I do like the skill of being a lawyer. I like the tools it gives you. Like I believe the law is a great way to analyze problems generally and risks generally. And so I'm like, okay, well, if I can marry that with some sort of business grounding, then I'll have options about what I can do. So I can go the legal route, but I could also do the business route. And so like, just do the both, just bite the bullet, do the year now. Lucky enough to get a scholarship, which helped. And there was only 3 of us in the whole school, but I think it was super valuable and I'm glad I did it.
As you mentioned, three folks. It's a little rare. I don't think I've had necessarily. I'm trying to think if I've had a JD-MBA on the podcast. I certainly don't think I've had someone who has done them concurrently. Right, folks who've gone back and gotten MBAs later. Just practically speaking, who do you think a JD-MBA is right for? If you were trying to advise maybe like a law school student or someone who's thinking about their career, thinking about going back to school. Who's that sort of program right for? And also, who's it wrong for too?
Yeah. I don't know who it's right for. I know it was right for me.
Yeah. And
I think it's right for people who really have maybe that. I came from a liberal arts education as my undergrad. And there are people who fit neatly into one box or another. And the people who will debate Supreme Court opinions, and there's people who love to analyze a business, via spreadsheet, right?
Yep.
There's people who love those two things, and I've always been kind of like to play multiple positions. And I really like the intersection of making business decisions in even areas of uncertainty.
Yes.
I don't need certainty. I've found a lot of people would like a lot more certainty than maybe I believe truly exists in the world. And what I think a legal degree helps you to understand is how to weigh uncertainty and kind of weigh it out. So law is hey, I can spot risk and I can evaluate risk, right? And the business side is I can actually price that risk. Or I can understand what that risk is worth and what are the weights on it? What are the probabilities of it coming to pass? So that combination is what I found is one of the things that I'm pretty good at, which is, and I think it comes from the training and the exposure over years. That was just in the startup world to actually having to make decision making under uncertainty at high velocity. And so you get enough reps at that. And I think a JD-MBA was great training for that kind of combination of hey, look, we live in an uncertain world, but we got to make decisions on a daily basis. how do we take bets that make sense? We're not like risk averse. It's actually about what are the risks we're going to accept and we're going to pursue, and do that with maybe less fear, and be like, okay, I understand it. Eyes wide open, here we go.
I'm going to ask you in just a second about your GC role at Remitly, but what you're saying really resonates with me personally, in that I think I like to often play sort of in the middle, right? Like, I'm not a banker, but I'm also not a lawyer. And the idea of becoming comfortable with uncertainty really resonates with me as well, because you're talking about that becoming comfortable with uncertainty in decision making on behalf of your business is really important, right? Being able to weigh different sides of the coin or different risks. Do you think that you can also, over the course of your career, teach yourself to be more comfortable with, or to become comfortable with, some uncertainty in your career? And I'm thinking specifically about your sort of path to becoming a founder, which is perhaps the most uncertain time horizon you can give yourself.
Yeah, 100%, because you realize that risks can be mitigated, and you learn to actually, like, lawyers, not to cast aspersions, but like they tend to focus like really on the downside and like the like parade of horribles, worst case outcome type stuff. That's great. Like you need to understand that. But the fact of the matter is, like, usually that's not actually how it plays out, right? So like the way I looked at it in founding the company, I was like, look, I've been incredibly blessed. I've had a great run. If this thing fails, which when you start out, like, have to accept as a distinct possibility, like, what's the worst that could really happen? Like, my life won't be ruined. Like, I'll still be here. I'll have learned, like, I think what it teaches you is that, one, it's never going to be as bad as the worst case scenario. And there's actually a lot of opportunity and interesting things that come up in just the act of trying, in the act of being there, and the act of showing up.
Yes.
And those are highly undervalued benefits that you can't actually ever realize if you're never willing to take the risk in the first place, right? So the downside's not as bad as it's going to be. And there's a lot more upside in it if you're willing to, like, embrace that, oh, maybe it looks a little bit different than I anticipated, but like, it's there. And I could give you like a million examples of like the fun of the journey that I never expected in doing this, and people that I've met and experiences that I've had that I never would have had. And like, even if the startup, it's going well, but even if it went away tomorrow, like, nobody can take that away from me. Nobody can take away like the founding experience. Nobody can take away like the joy of launching a product. No one can take away like Techstars program, people I've met, investors who are great, investors, like pitches that went horribly, like really hard days, but it's all part of the experience. Like, I think founding, a big reason that I founded or wanted to go out on my own was like, life is short. You get one shot, and I wanted to see like, what is that? Like, I feel like founding a company is like, for me anyways, like an act of like living the full experience, right?
Yes.
And putting yourself out there and seeing what comes of it. And so again, to the point you made, it's like you can't get those experiences without exposing yourself to risk and downside, but that's okay. That's just the world. Yeah.
I think, put into a little bit of like a framework, or put slightly in a similar way, investors like to think about asymmetric upside relative to the risk.
Yep.
And it's easy to think of the sort of founder journey or the startup journey as, well, there could be asymmetric upside relative to the sort of like capital investment required. But what you're saying is there's also a sort of underappreciated or undervalued asymmetric upside to the actual experience of doing this.
The psychic and qualitative side of it. And that's what people talk about when they say, like, in startups, like, the highs are high and the lows are low. It's not that your stock, your, like, share price is fluctuating like that. It's that, like, you get these, like, moments of, like, sheer joy from like, oh my God, we just solved something really big and meaningful, and that's going to drive this forward in ways that we understand now, and then ways that we don't even understand yet. And then the lows are like, I don't like the lows, but there's something like very real about like being that close to the like, to understanding the terror and the fear is like part of the experience too. That's why people like roller coasters. Right? So I guess I'm just an addict.
You had really great success in-house. For those folks who, haven't connected with you or followed you on LinkedIn before, you rose to be GC of Remitly. You were on the exec team. You managed a pretty large org within the business. That was important, not just from a legal perspective, but also really from an operational perspective, given the products that Remitly was offering. And you stepped aside right before the business went public. I think a lot of GCs out there, or just a lot of people generally, might say like, that's crazy. Going public is the capstone to a career. That's what we're all working for. Tell us like what was going through your mind at that point, and why you were saying, this is the right time to found a business. This is the right time to go out on my own. And I'm not going to follow convention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like the JD-MBA analogy is not like too far off here. Right? It's like, look, like I loved Remitly. I still love Remitly. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of what we did. And it's an amazing company, and it will be indefinitely. Like Matt's a great founder. Josh is a great founder. Like the team's amazing. And I'm like, love what they did. So yeah, I think people thought that it was a little crazy to step away. But as much as I loved being GC, right? It was like happy to get that seat, and I loved being a GC of that company in particular. But like, again, I didn't see myself ever as, I don't think I'm general counsel. Like that's not who I am. Right. And it felt good to have that title, to be honest. Like I enjoyed, like there was something rewarding about that. But like when it came to the actual brass tacks of running that function over time, I found it like it was getting narrower by necessity, right? Mm-hmm. The role of general counsel and the role of risk in this sort of like large public organization, like doesn't allow you to be this sort of like lateral player that I had been able to be for many years, and then my small but mighty team was able to be, and just be like be helpful to enabling the business across all these different things. Like the business itself had matured. There was good seasoned leaders across the organization were brought in that were just like that, and it's like, hey, legal team, is that a legal question or is that a business question? And you're like, you're right. That's a business call. That's my opinion. You're allowed, you can take it or leave it. And I kind of missed being able to be a true sort of like business partner. But fundamentally, it was like I saw this problem that existed in the market for like credit products built for those who were generally underserved by the credit system that exists in the United States. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I can't sleep at night because this problem is so big and it's so in front of us, and I need to go solve it. And like, so it wasn't that I was unhappy there. I loved it there. It's that I'm like, I see this problem. It needs to be solved. Why isn't somebody solving this problem? That's it. I'm going. We're gonna go solve this thing. So
can't sleep at night. The VCs love to hear that.
Well, I drink a lot of coffee.
Tell us, I tried to explain a little bit about what Upwardli does, but talk to us just for a second about, okay, who are your clients? Who does Upwardli serve? How do you facilitate credit being offered? Like what happens here operationally?
Yeah. So our mission is to solve the challenge of credit invisibility in the United States and then globally. Mm-hmm. And that, depending on how you count it, there's at least 50 million people in the United States who don't have credit, don't even have a credit score, or don't show up in the system, right?
Yep.
There are lots of companies who would like to serve that kind of demographic. Mm-hmm. But they can't because there isn't really like a bridge for a company who wants to serve that demographic to offer credit products. So what Upwardli does is we make it easy to launch and scale transformational credit products. And what that means is for the business that we're partnered with, so we're B2B or
Yep.
B2B fintech, what that means is the companies that we partner with, we give them a credit product they can offer into this demographic that will work, and it will change the nature of their business. So basically, like, hey, you can plug this in, and it's just going to help you grow, right?
Yeah.
And on the consumer side, it's like, oh my God, it's a product that works. So it comes from the Remitly experience, like international money transfer for mostly an immigrant customer base, made beautiful and easy. Like, we want to provide that level of beauty and simplicity and do it in a B2B model for credit products generally. And that came directly out of seeing the Remitly experience of, so many people who were coming on our platform. They just wanted to have a great financial experience, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to have a great experience sending money home. And we delivered that. And then to look around and be like, well, why doesn't that exist sort of like in the other financial products that are out there? Predatory, high interest rates, and janky product experiences. Like, we can solve that, like, done that before. So like, but let's abstract it a little bit and make it like, here's the big play. We want to enable any company to do that. And that's what we've been building for 2.5 years. So we've got some big clients. We've got a credit builder product. We've got credit card products, sort of white label, secured card product that's launching very soon with some great customers. And I think we're well on our way. Like, the way that we see it is by solving the problem at like a B2B level, we can have the scale necessary to really like fill in the gap of those 50 million people. Like, okay, so we've got like 18 to 25 year olds. So we've got people who are new to the country. We got people who are in gig work. We got people who are international students. You take all that together and suddenly, oh my gosh, we've like actually got like the map covered.
Yeah.
And from that, this rich database of information about like, we can actually now underwrite these people better in a way that enables the whole ecosystem to start to lend better and better into this 50 million person niche. And so that's the big play. And that's how, over the long run, I think we'll be able to, I really do think we can put a big dent in the problem of credit invisibility, both here in the US and then globally. So.
You took the business through Techstars. I'm curious to hear about your experience there. This is maybe more for other folks out there who are thinking about founding a business, or GCs who might be thinking about, okay, my CEO has gone and signed us up for an accelerator to raise money and to get some mentorship. And what was your experience like there? How do you think about accelerators? Yeah.
I think I'm a big proponent. We went through the Techstars Boulder program in 2022. And I think for like a first-time founder in particular, like, they are well worth it, because there's so much that you don't know, or so much that you think you know that you actually don't know, that you can learn by hard experience over a very long period of time. Or you can have sort of beaten into you over 3 months and then come out with this. You won't know it all, but like you'll have an idea. You'll get 80-20. And that's enough to make you dangerous. It's enough to make you aware. And you get some of our people I consider very close friends now, I met through the program, and it helps to just know that you're not alone. You're going through this stuff, going through the startup journey, kind of in parallel with these other great people who are on a day-to-day basis experiencing some of the same challenges that you are. I mean, we met each other through Tech GC, and I found that community to be very similar in that way. It's like somebody's maybe a couple months, we're all having the same problems, it's just they're showing up at different times because we're all at the same stage. So like, I would talk to this person who's having this issue, I'd be having this issue, and I'd talk to someone who just solved it 3 months prior. And then someone else would have an issue, and I'd be like, oh, I just solved that. Here's how we did it. Right. And so to have that kind of community that really helps to just solve the problems that nobody's written like books about or articles about, and to just have a conversation. Like, how did you solve that? Like, that was a weird negotiation I just went through. Like, have you had anything similar to that? Or like, how do you deal with this maybe, fundraising issue or go-to-market issue or branding issue, or, who did you use for your website design? Hey, that's really cool. Like, who do you use for that? Oh, do they have any free time? Like, you can't put a value on that.
It's a community, yeah, and you're able to get referrals and share ideas. And to your point, it might not be something that a VC fund is deemed worthy of a whole blog post or Medium post, or but that's great.
And the last point on it is like, startups are inherently like, you're facing an uphill battle, right? And most fail, and it's very hard to differ. Everyone's starting a fad. Everyone's got a startup, right? You need things, and I think Techstars and YC have done a good job at this. It's a really kind of a badge of approval. It's like a party mark that says like, hey, we've checked these guys out and they're good, which goes a long way when you're trying to differentiate early stage and fundraising or customer conversation, to be like, I'm backed by Techstars. Back by YC. That gives credibility that, you can't like puff yourself up enough for somebody to get that sort of, you know what I mean? Like that third party validation actually, for better or worse, is a real thing, and just acknowledge that that's out there. And accelerators are an easy way to acquire that.
The Abstract is brought to you by SpotDraft, an end-to-end contract lifecycle management system that helps high-performing legal teams become 10 times more efficient. If you spend hours every week drafting and reviewing contracts, worrying about being blindsided by renewals, or if you just want to streamline your contracting processes, SpotDraft is the right solution for you. From creating and managing templates and workflows to tracking approvals, e-signing, and reporting via an AI-powered repository, SpotDraft helps you in every stage of your contracting. And because it should work where you work, it integrates with all the tools your business already uses. SpotDraft is the key that unlocks the potential of your legal team. Make your contracting easier today at spotdraft.com. You're giving something up, equity, but you're getting something valuable in return if you haven't, say, raised twice before from Sequoia or Andreessen or Madrona or whoever it is. I do want to ask you about fundraising. How has fundraising been? You did a good pitch of Upwardli earlier. But talk to us about like successes that you've had with fundraising, mistakes you've made that you think others can learn from.
I have many thoughts on fundraising. I hadn't done it prior. And it's also one of the things that like an accelerator helps teach you is like, how do you effectively pitch? And I didn't have that skill when I started out. So I do think, like, again, if you haven't gone through that journey and done the pitching yourself, like that should, an accelerator is a great way to like get those reps, because they'll make you do it. I'd say one of the big things that I learned is you have to view it as a process, and you can't do it side of desk. Like I think many founders and I talk to a bunch. Founders who do fundraising effectively are very disciplined about it. And that means you can't go like, hey, I'm going to do product and maybe sales like 50% of the time, and I'm going to fundraise 50% of the time. Like, you can't. Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec at one point quote, you should never half-ass two things. You should whole-ass one thing. If you're fundraising, you're fundraising. That's what you do. And people say like, you got to walk and chew gum at the same time. You got to be able to do multiple things. I'm like, I actually don't believe that. What you need to do is fundraise, because that improves your probabilities of success. Because if I'm talking to 10 VCs, like, your chances of hearing no for any number of reasons, just not the right time. Maybe they don't have the capital. Maybe they're doing other deals. Like, it's like exceedingly low. If you talk to 100, your odds go up, right? But the only way to talk to 100 VCs in a week or in 2 weeks is to knuckle up, have your list, and treat it like enterprise sales. I didn't appreciate, I didn't know what that was a couple of years ago. What you need to do is like, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself for a significant period of time to just having as many conversations as possible, advancing people through the pipeline, actually trying to get them to say no, because they'll drag you. Get them to no faster, push them to no. And if they keep saying yes, great, advance them. But like, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking with folks who are like, hey, this is great. Let's, put me on your distro. We'll like talk in a few months. When you're raising, that's like poison, because I need to use those half-hour blocks to talk to people who actually, might want to write a check and not like, aren't just like kind of like, hanging around the hoop and waiting to pounce when the an easy rebound comes up, right? And we've proven out the business metrics that have de-risked it all for them. There are people who are willing to take risk. I love those people. And what I love about the fundraising process is a process, and it is a slog, but it is worth it to find the handful of people who like truly believe in your company and like at their core and believe it needs to exist and are willing to evangelize for it. Versus folks who are like, oh, this is an interesting space and I have a passing curiosity, or I've got a thesis around it, and aren't really like bought into you as a founder or what specifically you're trying to do. So it just I love the people who invested in us. And it was almost like a weird, not to be romantic about it, but it's kind of like a love at first sight thing. It's like, you're having, so in a fundraising process, you're having like 100 meetings, right? 200 meetings. And most of them, some of them go like really poor. It's like dating. It's like speed dating. And some of them really poorly. And you're just like, oh God, I hate this. This is so, do I really have to keep doing this? Like, do I want to get on the next call and like get myself, mentally ready? And then you get on the call and then it's one of these people that get it and get you. And it's just like it's 5 minutes. Like the decision's already, you can tell that like this is going to work. And that makes it worth it. And those people, like our board, like we have this great investor called Dundee Venture Capital. Shout out to Catherine Williams, who's on our board. Like I knew the minute that we met, like this is probably going to work. And there are others on our cap table, J4 Cascade Seed Fund, like that I call a Vesta Fund. There's so many. Senator, who I can call up and I can tell them, I can have a business chat and have a transparent conversation with them about what's going well, what's going poorly. And they're not like they feel more invested than just the dollars. Yeah. And so I don't know, it's worth do a process right, do it hard. It's worth it. You'll find people you didn't expect. And for people who are kind of hemming it, the way you can end up in trouble is like, if you're not having enough meeting, you're not going to meet those people. You're just not. And you may end up with some investors perhaps that you're less enthused about because you didn't take the time to see what's out there. Yeah. So I'd just say you got to be all in, and the world will pressure you to not be all in. But I think you have to have the discipline to be like, this is what I'm all about for either this quarter or 2 quarters. So that's what it's going to take.
I was going to ask you what you learned about pitching and pitching effectively. But maybe a secondary question in there is pitching important? Because you're talking about sort of having like a simpatico with the investors who really get it. Do you still need to sell them on the vision? Talk to us about what pitching has been like for you.
It's been a journey. Again, I didn't know how to do it when I started out. Like my first fundraising pitch was in retrospect, huge embarrassing failure that I didn't recognize at the time. Like VCs expect to be pitched. And they expect to be pitched in a certain format because what they're trying to do is extract the core nuggets of information about your business to understand whether it's something that they're interested in and whether you can effectively communicate it in a way that says, hey, I can lead this organization to realize this vision, right? And you have to do it verbally on cue. You got to like be able to do that song. In my first fundraising pitch, I did what I would do at Remitly, which is like, hey, for a big investment decision, be like, hey, here's this great opportunity or this problem we need to solve. Here's how I can solve it. Here's a written memo, 6 pages with the supporting graphs and charts and explanation, whatever. And here's how we can do it. And like, it'll cost, X. And so
Amazon style.
It was very much Amazon style. And so what I did is, when I just started out, I'm like, here's the company, here's the idea behind the company, here's a 6-page memo, and I distribute it to like the VCs ahead of the first meeting. And I show up to the first meeting and like say, so everyone's read the memo. I'm like prepared to take questions. And it was on a Zoom because it was like mid-pandemic. And like, it was just like, go radio silence for like 15 seconds. Like, I'm like, is this camera on? That's not how you do it. It's like, you have to, VC is a sales pitch, but you're not selling your product. You're selling your company. You're selling the vision, and that the rules of the game, and I can play this at a very high level. And so what they're looking for is you need to be able to communicate the story, to explain the vision, and to do that like succinctly, which I'm failing to do here. And like entertaining and like show your personality a little bit. And if you can do that, like, okay, great. Like you passed that test. But that's like one of many skills. Like you end up learning by trial by fire in just doing this. So like, and the only way to get good at it is just to do it a whole lot.
We've talked about getting over the sort of hump and founding the business, fundraising, going through an accelerator. Another aspect here is you've managed big teams before, but now you're the CEO, and ultimately all the employees are going to be looking to you. Learning to lead as a CEO, I'm sure, isn't easy. What are the aspects of the role that you feel like have required the most sort of personal growth for you? How do you feel like you've grown over the past 2.5 years?
I mean, I've definitely evolved in that while I had like a multifunctional organization before, it was always kind of like through a risk lens, and that like there's a very legalistic lens, and now it's like over everything. So like, how do you think about like how an engineering organization should perform? Like, how do you think about how a sales organization perform? And like, especially when you're not a subject matter expert, like when I ran legal, like I'm a lawyer, like I can understand how this should look, feel. And compliance is also a risk function. So like I can understand we're trying to control for risks. We have a different outlook on it, but now it's much broader. So that has been a learning. I think external communications has been a growth area. And I think we just went over that. And then, managing, like being able to set the vision for like the entire organization, and then really be the one who helps to drive priorities. Whereas before I could make advice and I'd be like, we should have done, okay, that's the decision that's made. But like, I would have done it slightly different. Like it's hard being in the seat and setting those priorities when there's so much you can do and there's so much you want to do, but it's like, you got to be like ruthless in terms of your prioritization. And I think, lawyers as advisors generally, executing it is a different thing. So I've had a new appreciation for like, how do you make these hard trade-offs that you would have recommended? Maybe you would have recommended it, but then you actually got to go and execute it. And not get into this like paralysis by analysis mode, which, I think you can, perhaps the downside of being a lawyer is maybe you can overthink things sometimes.
Sure. Let's talk a little more about that. I would imagine there's been a pretty big mindset shift from being a lawyer to being a CEO in terms of your priorities, how you view yourself from an accountability perspective to the business, like you're alluding to, right? You're not just sort of advising the decision. Ultimately, every decision that is made by the business might not be exactly what you would do, I suppose, as the org gets bigger and bigger, but it is a culture that you've created and a business that you've created and a vision that you've set. To talk to us about that mindset shift from being, I'm a lawyer, to I now run the business.
Yeah, it's funny. Like it is, because before, as a lawyer, as an advisor, you're an input to a decision, and you're an input to a business decision, and that's how it should work. Except in like very specific contexts, right? You're an advisor to a principal, and the principal is the one who makes the decision. And one of the things I didn't appreciate is when I did the founder role, and making these decisions, like I kind of took some of that, like I'm an advisor and here's how I would before process and present information. And when I started doing this, I would actually I'd make the same decision as if I were in that old role. So I basically would take all that analysis and risk adjustment, and then that would be communicated like as the decision. Whereas what I realized is actually you need to take that in, input it, and filter it through all like the business needs of the organization, and then weigh that out, and perhaps even be willing to ignore some of that advice to make a reasoned decision. I think a good example of this is like in our first fundraising round, our pre-seed deal led by Dundee. They gave us a term sheet. We're like, great, this is great. And I turned it over to our lawyers, and they come back and, they mark it up like crazy because that's what lawyers do.
Yeah.
In my old role as GC, I would take that and I would be like, well, what actually matters here? And like, what are the business ones that I think we should negotiate on? And then I'd make that recommendation to Matt, and he would say, no, we were really only going to like negotiate on this one thing. Right. Or we're not like, that's not important. Like, how important is that really? Right. Okay. Now fast forward, and I'm in the seat. And I got this big markup, and me just being the lawyer, be like, okay, well, we can trim this down a little bit. And, we'll end up like turning back to our VC partner, like, oh, totally marked up, red line. And she immediately calls me up. She goes, Aaron, there are 140 track changes. And as soon as she said that, I'm like, oh shit, I didn't filter. Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't put a business filter on my stupid legal brain. I need to be Matt and Aaron,
Yes.
I can't just be Aaron. Now I have to do this role. So I learned a lot that way. And ever since then, I've processed, that sort of like legal instinct, with this muscle that I built up over years, needs to be countered. And so that's been some of the journey.
We've talked about the highs and the lows of the sort of founder journey. We're talking about Wisconsin in just a second. You were living in Seattle. You're in Seattle right now. You telephone or teleport or into Seattle a lot. And I was listening to an interview with Jeff Bezos the other day where he talks about how he doesn't think CEOs should be stressed because they can delegate their stress away. And I sort of get that, but I also think you're the founder, you own the business, like you have ownership over the business is really what I'm saying. And it's also early, like for you. Maybe that's true if you have 10,000 people working for you, but with a smaller team, right? Like problems are going to bubble up. And so my question to you is like, how do you personally manage that stress, being a founder and being in the seat and feeling like you're responsible, feeling like you're accountable?
Some days better than others.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is, and our co-founders and the team share this as well, is like, we care really deeply about solving the problem. And that keeps you going even when you're stressed or things are hard. Like if we didn't really care about solving the problem, I think it'd be easy. Like the stress probably could be overwhelming.
Sure.
But it's like, hey, we're making progress and we know what we need to do. And so like, the stress actually helps you focus on the things that matter
Mm-hmm.
rather than chase, because the stress is being created because it's like we need to deliver a very specific thing. And that is known. And it's just like it's hard to do all that in a short amount of time with limited resources. I think the stress actually helps you focus as long as you don't let it like have negative externalities and stress is contagious too. So you have to kind of like manage that person. That's been part of the journey too, is learning to manage your own emotions through the whole thing. And then, find things that like are stress relief in a healthy way. Routine for me, it's routine, like just being able to like, I have routines and exercise and things to look forward to that are outside of work. Because if left to my own devices, like my mind would just be crunching on the same problems over and over and over, and you need to like tune it out. And so like keeping some semblance of balance. So my kids, family, exercise, wife, like these are important parts of my life that I don't like. I have to be more than just the founder of this company.
Right.
Yeah.
A final sort of question for you on the Upwardli journey before I've got a few fun questions to close us out. An interesting aspect of this is you're building Upwardli in Wisconsin. You moved there. You're deeply connected still to the Seattle tech ecosystem. But, how do you think about building a company in a slightly different market than San Francisco, Seattle, New York City, finding talent in maybe unexpected or slightly underappreciated places? Talk to us about that.
I mean, I firmly believe that great companies can come from anywhere. And that's mostly because great people can come from anywhere. And, these great things now called planes and Zoom that mean that so the joke that I think you just made was like I work out of Milwaukee, but my team is heavily in Seattle. So like sometimes I say I live in Milwaukee, but I work in Seattle. Like we can be everywhere. And because talent is everywhere, it allows us to access, especially as a startup, the right people for the role at the right time. That would probably be harder to do if we were just in the Bay Area or just in Seattle. I do think it has like you're swimming up. Like I'll be completely honest. You're swimming upstream. Like these ecosystems don't exist in the same way in my neck of the woods. But that's and when you're a startup, you need every advantage that you can to help you, both from like capital and capital and partners and just the ecosystem around. And that so I get why there is a systemic advantage to being San Francisco, Seattle, New York, but great founders and great companies can come from anywhere. And if you're truly committed to building a great company and you're willing to say, like, I understand that trade-off, but I'm going to make it work anyways, is very founder-like, right? To be like, there's some great founders that I've met around Wisconsin, which is probably going to shock some people, like up in Green Bay and around Milwaukee and Chicago, like truly great founders who are just like, I'm going to make it happen. And I don't care that I've got all these other systemic disadvantages. I don't care. I'm going to do it here and watch me. Right. Yeah. And then, we'll see what, check in 10 years and let's see how we're doing. I don't know.
I think it's awesome. And there's a bunch of VCs now, I think, who recognize for a variety of reasons, they've got LPs who want them to invest in companies that are not just coming out of a few hubs or not just on the coast. They're trying to help and also sort of chasing returns in places like Milwaukee.
Yep. And I think people want the opportunity, like the University of Wisconsin. There are many great academic institutions that are churning out incredibly talented people, both who graduated. Again, smart people can come from anywhere. Great talented people can come from anywhere. But people do want to live in Wisconsin. I didn't grow up there. My wife did. She brought me there. But they want to go back and they want to live a life that has some balance and reflects maybe their values differently than other folks. And they're just looking for opportunities. So like, can my company, can others be a reason that people come back or go? I think so, because there's no monopoly on why. Like there are, again, network effects as to why San Francisco attracts. But I think there are people who are like, who are outliers like me or whatever, who just, that's not how they want to do things. And that's okay. And you know what? Come to Wisconsin, come work with Upwardli. Like, we're gonna do something great in Milwaukee and surprise some folks.
It's awesome. A few fun questions for you now as we start to wrap up. Your favorite part of your routine or your day-to-day?
Talking with our customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 100%. So like the businesses that we support, like the models and their unique angle on a particular industry or industry segment. Those are, you learn. So I like to learn. So like you get to learn so much about an industry and companies and like how these different sectors of the economy work that you'd have no exposure to otherwise. And I get to like see all this really cool stuff. So like we've got a company that we're partnered with called Tip House. They're Seattle based. I just met them yesterday. And what they do is tip distribution, like tip calculation and distribution for hospitality industry. So like now that everything's gone digital, rather than give people cash, like across the counter at the end of the night to pay them for their tips. What we do is they do the calculation and they push it onto a card that we host. But I get to learn about, like, I was a waiter at one point and I got paid in cash. And now I get to see, here's how the digital economy has changed how restaurants work. Wow, that is so cool. Like, and we've got 17 companies like that. So every day I'm learning something new and I'm excited about the models that we're helping to enable that weren't possible before. So that's fun.
Do you have a professional pet peeve?
I don't like it. And I'm guilty of this too. I don't like it when people are late. I was a college football player and my coach used to say, like, if you're on time, you're late. So I don't like lateness generally. And then don't ghost me. Like don't ever go radio silent on me. Like as a lawyer back in the firm days, like you just learn to be like highly responsive to clients, right? Even if it's just say like, hey, got your message. Like I'll get back to you in half an hour or an hour by end of day. Like when I get radio silence, it drives me up the wall.
Sure. I will say you're an understanding guy. I lost power right as we were about to start to record this podcast. And Aaron was nice enough to say, we'll figure it out or we'll reschedule if we have to. He knows I can't control it.
You called me and you said this is the issue. And that's totally acceptable.
Yeah.
But if we had gone like 15 minutes, I'd be like, geez, where the hell's Tyler? Cranky interviewee.
Yeah. I'm a big reader and I like to ask our guests if they have a book recommendation for the audience. Could be professional, could just be something interesting you've read recently. Any books you like?
There is a lot. The best book on general management I've ever read is High Output Management by the former CEO of Intel. And I still pull that off the shelf and read it. And I just think it's good, like business, firsthand experience. I recommend that to anyone. And then for those who are interested in startups, The Right It, which is about like, how do you you come into the world with like a problem statement about like, I think the world, like this is a problem. I saw it from like the founding story, like here's the problem statement, but the solution is actually probably something that is not in your head because you have an idea what the solution should be. And then you go and take it into the world and they're like, actually, that doesn't resonate with me at all. And you don't want to build products like that. Right. And so The Right It is about how you get to a solution that people actually want, a solution to a problem that people actually want and will pay for quickly with limited resources. And so I recommend that to anyone who's in startup world, because I think that's the mentality you have to get to figure out that 0 to 1 journey is all about prototyping and prototyping your way into product market fit before you go and build the big monster optimized machine. So.
I love it. 2 new books for the audience. As we wrap up, last question for you, sort of my traditional closing question. And that's if you could look back on your days as a young lawyer, maybe just graduating with the JD-MBA from GW, something that you know now that you wish that you'd known back then.
It's going to be okay. Like, you can jump. You don't have to have certainty. No one knows the future. Take smart risks and work your ass off, and it's going to work out. I think that version of me would have been scared by some of the risks that I took.
Sure.
Not knowing the outcome. And I was scared looking at some of those things, but I do think that you don't realize that you can land on your feet, right? These decisions, you can make them and you can pivot and you can change. And we're all making decisions every day. Amazon has this like 1-way door, 2-way door construct, right? Most decisions are 2-way doors, and it can be pretty quickly changed. We're human, we're fluid, we can change. The risks that you take, as long as you know the true downside, like you can take them and you'll be all right.
Thank you. This has been a really great conversation, Aaron. Super candid, good for lawyers, legal professionals, GCs, founders. Pretty much everyone should listen to this in business.
I would say I think there's like a N of 1 out there that this is applicable to.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tyler. It was great seeing you.
And to all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Abstract, and we hope to see you next time.